I never thought I'd live to see the day my own son would tell me to get out of my own house. But that's exactly what happened last Thursday. The house I'd worked 25 years to pay off, the one where I raised him, taught him to ride a bike, celebrated birthdays and Christmases, it suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. It started with an argument about money, like most family fights do. My son, Jake, had been struggling to keep up with bills after losing his job 6 months ago. I'd been helping where I could, but lately he'd been drinking more and talking to me like I was the problem. That night, he snapped. He said I was, in the way, that I didn't understand how hard life was now, and before I could even finish my sentence, he pointed at the door. "You can go stay with your friends if you love telling everyone how bad things are here," he said, his voice shaking. I just stood there, holding my old coat, heart pounding. So I left. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just walked out into the cold evening, wondering where I'd sleep. I was too proud to call anyone for help, but someone must have seen me sitting on the curb with my bag, because a familiar car pulled up a few minutes later. And when Jake saw who came to pick me up later that night, the color drained from his face. The car that pulled up beside me was one I hadn't seen in years, a sleek black Cadillac, the kind that purred instead of roared. The window rolled down, and for a second, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. But there he was, Frank Miller. Frank wasn't just anyone. He was my old business partner, the man I'd built my small construction company with before things went south 10 years ago. We hadn't spoken since the fallout, since Jake's mother passed away and I sold my share of the company to pay off debts. Frank had tried to reach out back then, but pride kept me from answering. "Bill," he said, his voice steady but soft. "Get in. You shouldn't be out here." I hesitated, still clutching my duffel bag like it was a lifeline. "What are you doing here, Frank?" He gave a half smile. "Let's just say I still keep an eye on old friends." I got in, mostly because I didn't have anywhere else to go. The warmth of the heater hit my face, and I felt something break inside me, a mix of exhaustion, shame, and relief. We didn't talk much on the drive, just a few quiet words. But as we pulled into the driveway of a house I didn't recognize, I realized something: this wasn't just a friendly pickup. Frank had a plan, and when Jake found out who had taken me in, he wasn't going to like it one bit. Frank's house was nothing short of impressive, modern, wide glass windows, the smell of cedar and fresh coffee inside. It was the kind of place that whispered success. He hadn't changed much either, same confident walk, same calm tone, except now his hair was fully silver. He showed me to a guest room, gave me clean clothes, and set a plate of food on the table. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I saw it. For the first time that night, I felt human again. After dinner, Frank poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me. "So, what happened, Bill?" he asked quietly. I sighed. "Jake and I got into it again. Money, mostly. He's been angry, different. Tonight, he told me to get out. I think I actually believed he didn't mean it until the door slammed." Frank nodded, his expression unreadable. "You know, you were always too soft on that boy. You gave him everything you had." "Maybe," I admitted, staring at my calloused hands. "But he's still my son." Frank leaned back, crossing his arms. "And yet, he kicked you out. Tell me, Bill, if he saw you with me, how do you think he'd react?" I frowned. "Probably not well. He blames you for a lot of what happened back then." Frank smirked. "Good. Then maybe it's time we remind him, and a few others, that I'm not the man to underestimate." I wasn't sure what he meant at first. But the next morning, when I saw the black truck loaded with equipment and the folder labeled, Miller Construction and Sons, reopening proposal, I began to understand. Frank wasn't just helping me. He was coming back, with me at his side. The next morning, Frank was already up before sunrise, dressed sharp in his old work boots and jacket that still had our company's faded logo on the sleeve. On the kitchen table lay a folder, thick with papers and blueprints. My name was on the first page, William Hayes, co-founder and partner. I stared at it, confused. "Frank, what is this?" He smiled faintly. "A second chance, Bill. For both of us. I've got investors ready to bring Miller Construction back, under the original name. I want you beside me again." I shook my head slowly. "After everything that happened, you'd really trust me again?" He leaned forward. You made mistakes. So did I. But I never stopped respecting you. And I sure as hell won't let your own son treat you like you're worthless. The words hit hard. I wanted to argue, but part of me knew he was right. I'd spent years letting guilt and pride bury me. Maybe this was my way out, or my way back. Later that day, Frank drove us to the hardware store near my old neighborhood. Word spread fast in small towns, and by noon, Jake showed up. His face was tight with anger and confusion when he saw me standing next to Frank, holding blueprints. "What the hell is this?" Jake demanded. "You're working with him again. After everything he did to us." Frank didn't flinch. "Careful, son. You don't know half the story." Jake turned to me, eyes burning. "Dad, he ruined you. And now you're crawling back." I took a deep breath. "No, Jake." I'm standing back up. That silenced him. But I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes, because he knew that if Frank and I were truly back in business, his little kingdom at the house wasn't the only thing he might lose. Jake didn't say another word at the hardware store. He just stood there, fists clenched, jaw tight. Frank gave him a look, cold, steady, almost fatherly in its own harsh way, before walking out to take a call. That left the two of us alone in the aisle, surrounded by the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of sawdust. "Dad," Jake finally said, voice lower now. "You really trust that guy again? After what happened to Mom?" I froze. There it was, the wound that never healed. For years, Jake believed Frank was responsible for the financial mess that tore our family apart, the one that led to me selling our home and Mom working herself sick to keep us afloat. But the truth wasn't that simple. "Jake," I said quietly, "Frank didn't ruin us." "I did." He blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I sighed. "When your mom got sick, I hid how bad the company's debts were. I borrowed money, more than I should have, and signed contracts without Frank's knowledge. He tried to bail me out, but the damage was already done. I blamed him because it was easier than facing what I did." Jake's expression softened, but only for a second. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because you were a kid," I said. "And I couldn't stand the thought of you looking at me the way you are right now." He looked away, chewing on his lip. "So, what, you and Frank are just going to start over? Like none of that happened?" I nodded slowly. "Maybe not like it never happened. But maybe like it's not the end of the story." At that moment, Frank came back inside. "Everything's set," he said briskly. "We've got a meeting with the city board next week. Bill, you'll want to be there." Jake's eyes flicked between us, uncertainty written all over his face. For the first time in a long time, he didn't look angry, he looked lost. And when he asked, "Can I come too?" I knew something inside him had shifted. The morning of the city board meeting, I woke up feeling like it was 20 years ago again, nervous, hopeful, and a little scared. Frank had picked me up in that same black Cadillac, this time with Jake in the back seat, dressed in his one clean button-up shirt. The silence on the drive was thick enough to cut with a knife. Frank broke it first. "Jake," he said, not looking in the mirror, "you've got your father's stubborn streak. That's a good thing, if you know how to use it." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just here to see what this is about." Frank chuckled. "Fair enough." When we arrived, the boardroom felt intimidating, long table, polished wood, a dozen serious faces. Frank handed out the proposal folders while I tried to steady my hands. The project we were pitching wasn't small. It was a full-scale housing development, focused on affordable homes for veterans and low-income families. "This isn't about profit," Frank said firmly during his presentation. "It's about rebuilding trust. And no one knows how to do that better than the man sitting next to me." Every head in the room turned to me. I wasn't used to attention anymore. But when I looked over at Jake, I saw something unexpected in his eyes, not pity, not anger, but pride. I cleared my throat. "We've both made mistakes," I began. "But sometimes, the only way to make peace with the past is to build something new out of it." After we finished, the room was quiet for a long moment before one of the board members finally said, "Gentlemen, we'd be proud to back this." Frank shook my hand so firmly it almost hurt. Jake actually smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. But that smile wouldn't last long. Because later that night, when Jake got a phone call from someone he hadn't heard from in years, his face went pale again. Coming next, the call that broke the